I've been coming here since 2007 in various capacities, and it's one of my favorite things in the year. It's one of the things I always look forward to the most. It's one of the most exhausting things I've ever done in my life every year. Extraordinarily tiring, but it's immensely fun, and there's something really energizing about not just the work, but about having all the people together and having 60 or 70 people who have the same weird, nerdy interests that I do and want to hang out talking about semicolons for 5 days when it's 34 degrees outside. It benefits translators in lots of different ways. There is a focus on the craft of translating, which is really unusual. There's a focus on very, very slow work, articulating your decisions, having to justify and think about your decisions, all those things that you do quite naturally and quite instinctively without really having to think about when you're working on your own. You have to articulate, you have to have that discipline of knowing how to talk about the thing that you're doing. So I think you learn a huge amount in craft, partly from your workshop leader perhaps, or the writer you're translating, but also from the group of people you're working with.
The way we arrange things at the summer school is that there's always a workshop leader and usually then as well an author, the author of the text that they're translating, and for many that's a new experience as well, and it's an exciting experience.
As far as the writers in residence go and the summer school, I've been able to see a few of the writers in action, and I think this is really quite unique about this summer school, is how important the writers are to the translation process. And I've seen Elvira Dones, the Swiss, Albanian, Italian writer, and Lina Meruane, and all the other writers. They really are able to help the translators and the course leaders to see what they intended to do, what kind of context for their writing, what they meant by a certain word.
I think the summer school is fantastic, not just for the students, but also for the writers who get to go through their text. They get their text torn apart by very bright, very clever, very sensitive readers, and may sometimes have to engage with questions that they weren't even aware existed.
It has been actually very exciting to see how everybody is trying to interpret what I did, and also for me it's been a challenge because we are translating a piece that I wrote 20 years ago. So in many ways I am also a fresh reader of that text, and I'm trying to remember what my criteria and decisions were at the time. It's also an opportunity for me to rethink my own text and sometimes introduce some corrections, because when I see them struggle with parts of the text, it's sometimes because there is actually a problem or a misunderstanding in the original text. So that has been a really interesting, fluid relationship, a sort of a give and take. And I have learned also some English, actually, the nuances of words.
When you apply to the BCLT Summer School, you apply for a workshop strand. So you may apply for a language-specific workshop. So this year we had French, Italian, Spanish and Slovenian. Or you may apply to one of the two multilingual workshops. We offer multilingual poetry and multilingual prose, and they're for translators translating from any language into English.
So in the multilingual poetry workshops, we do two things. One is people bring in translations they've made already, and we kind of workshop those like you would in a poetry workshop. The other main thing is that people also bring in originals, and we work on doing group translations where we ask the poet to kind of create a crib or a very rough literal, and we go through it line by line and try and make all those decisions as a group about what would be best for the poem. That's amazing because it's such a great way to kind of share practice and learn about different poetries and different traditions. And you know, this week we've looked at Belarusian, we've looked at Korean, Arabic, you know, so many different languages. I've learned so much and discovered so many poets. It's really exciting.
And so mostly what we do is we're focusing on the translations rather than on the process and the original. So we're focusing on these pieces of English. So for the last few years what would happen is each participant would bring in something they were working on, a piece of English language translation they had written, and we would sort of scrutinize that, interrogate it really closely, almost disregarding the fact that it happened to have come from Korean or Polish or Turkish or Hungarian. Because what we're really doing is the thing that we're all expert in, which is having a very sharp editorial eye to a piece of English. So we're focusing on that end of the process and trying to tease out little problems and tease out little questions. This year we're doing something a bit more specific, because this year I have a group that is looking particularly at books for children and teenagers. So we have part of it is the same thing, that people bring in their own work, but we're also looking at a lot of picture books. While I'm talking to you now, my group is sitting very quietly in a room translating picture books, which means learning to look at pictures very closely, learning to think about how pictures and text relate to one another. And so this year is this very particular focus. But again, one of the riches of it is this incredible range of kinds of experience, but also kinds of language. And if you have a Korean translator in a room, and a Danish translator in a room, and a Japanese translator in a room, and a French translator in a room, they each bring really different, useful kinds of insights to a sort of common conversation mostly about English.
So for mid-career and more experienced literary translators, we also have a workshop strand which is called Training the Trainer, and that's for literary translators that would like to go into running their own literary translation workshops, possibly in their home country.
Well, I think the Training of Trainers strand is a really good innovation. This is the second year that we've had that strand, and it's for experienced literary translators to come and partly to observe the summer school and the different workshops and the different styles of teaching literary translation, and also to talk to each other and other experienced translators and people like Kate Briggs about the different methodologies and the different ways to teach literary translation, both within the university and the non-academic side of teaching literary translation, working with practitioners and looking at professional development for literary translators, both from early career but throughout their career. And it's great having that range of experience from the US, from Singapore, from Argentina, as well as the UK, you know, a real kind of mix of backgrounds. So I think that is a very, very exciting new development.
Well, what we do in our strand is to go around to all the different groups and observe them in turn. So what I've really enjoyed about my time here is being able to see how every teacher does things slightly differently, and the ways the workshops are run, and I've learned different things from each.
A few years ago we introduced creative writing to the BCLT Summer School. This is an opportunity for the literary translators to explore their creative practice with English-speaking authors at 2 sessions during the week.
That's something that we talk about a lot at the National Centre for Writing as well, the fact that literary translation is a writing practice alongside creative writing. And I think that the creative writing workshops really remind literary translators that they are writers, and it gives them different ways of exploring all the literary skills that you want as a literary translator. And it's also a nice way to start the morning, frankly.
So as well as the literary translation workshops, all delegates get to go to 3 plenary sessions at the summer school, and those sessions are lectures or panel discussions with industry professionals. So for example, this year we had Kate Briggs, who gave us a lecture on writing this little art. We had a publishers panel which focused on pitching to publishers, how to get your work published, how to get contact with publishers. And we also had a session with Alvira Donez, who talked about Sworn Virgin and how she got that novel published in English.
The summer school to me is just an absolutely wonderful chance to spend a week with other people who are thinking about the same things about translation and are at different stages along their career path, but with the same passions. And I did this summer school for a few years when I was getting going as a translator, and it was great, partly for learning about translation, but mainly I think just for the other conversations that happen over meals or over a drink, and the friends you make. Yeah.
Translation is the translation community is a very kind of tightly articulated, networked group of people who share a passion, who share a kind of common mission. I think you know, translators are all proselytizers for translation and for international writing, and I know a lot of the translators I've become friends with, the people I've met at summer school. A lot of the translators who have worked together have met each other at summer school. There is a translators collective called the Starling Bureau, who are all people who were at BCLT Summer School together once upon a time and met here for the first time. So I think a lot of what translators get out of this is craft, and that attentiveness to craft, and that really slow, nerdy arguing about commas. But I think being part of this group, everyone's in the plenary sessions together and going for a drink and having their meals together, I think that's a really important part of it too.
When we work as a translator, we work alone, and we ask ourselves many questions. And now we have other people like us to ask them the questions that we usually ask ourselves alone. So it's great. Yeah.
There's so many things. I don't even know where to start. Like, first, it's just brilliant to be in this community and being around the people who are so passionate about one of the same things that I'm so passionate about, and that we really want to make a huge part of our lives. And just being able to have these conversations in real time, I think it's just really exciting about the school.